Hey, welcome back to Nobody Told Me with Mike and Blaine. And I got to tell you, we took a break. I mean, if it comes down to it, we took it a break. If you, first of all, let me tell you something about losing weight, Blaine. Uh, I was just on the world's worst weight loss program. If you get the COVID vaccine, there's a chance you'll get appendicitis. And the combination of those two is the best weight loss program in the world because you can eat anything you want. You just don't want to eat. So, so I lost like 15 pounds over the last 2.5 weeks just while we've been going through this. And I'm short of part, right? So I'm not even all original parts anymore. They took my appendix out. So a little bit of break in our broadcasting, but I am so glad to be back. I'm so glad to be here with you. And today we're going to talk about pricing, right? How do I price my stuff? So Blaine, welcome back, guy. What's been going on in your world?
Yeah, well, it's been too long, and it was and last week it was kind of my fault because I left the house for the first time in 6 months to go to an event that I really didn't want to go to but felt I should go to, and then caught a really nasty cold, and I'm still suffering a bit, so I'm going to try and mute myself if I go into a coughing fit, but feeling pretty good. So I'm excited to be back because it's been too long of a gap. We're too used to talking to you all the time.
Well, you know what? Yeah, I got kind of used to it. It's like this is the meeting I look forward to every single week, and not doing it those 2 weeks in a row, man. I didn't realize how much I missed it. So
yeah.
Good. Hey, what are you drinking today? What are we doing?
Okay, so today I've got something called Vertical Fog. It's got this really kind of cool, like retro 60s can, and it's from a brewery in Edmonton here called Town Square, and it's just a nice little brewery. It's a bit of an unexpected area and kind of this kind of little strip mall. My wife and I found it a couple of years ago and had a great pizza there and some nice beer. And so I saw them in the liquor store the other day. I'm like, I got to grab one of these. This is a brand new one I haven't tried. So, and it is a hazy pale ale. So that's what I'm drinking today. How about you?
Got it. Well, I tell you what, right before the show, you're like, oh, I can't get that beer because it's 11%. And when you said that, I looked at the one I got and it's 9.5%. So this may be an interest. I mean, if I start slurring, I mean, that's just part of it, I think. So
I just got a thing after this. That's why I had a jumbo 11% can. I'm like, oh, maybe not this time, but this, I bet you that's a good one. So what is it?
Okay, so what I'm doing is the Dream Crusher, and it's by Deep Ellum Brewery. So I'm, you know me, I've been sticking with Texas, and there's been plenty of little things I can find around Texas, but it's a 2 times rye IPA. So I'm expecting a big, heavy bite, big, heavy taste. Deep Ellum's up in Dallas, Texas, and it's kind of named after kind of a hip, trendy bar, nightlife type area. Some people might know the name Deep Ellum because there is a distillery there that makes vodkas, like flavored vodkas, Deep Ellum vodkas. So some people might know from that, but I'm going to try this today, and I'm going to try to stay focused for the entire hour.
Well, good luck. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah. So let's see here. So I'm excited about today because everyone has that issue. Everyone has that problem with pricing. Like, I mean, how do you price? Because it's the one thing everybody that wants to buy from you wants to know. So let's talk about it. Let's get into it.
Yeah, and it's pricing is something that we obsess with today. We've always been a little bit obsessed with it, and it's tough because it's an art and a science, and pricing oftentimes has as much to do with your marketing message, if not more, than your product or service. So it's a really, really tricky one. It has more to do with the perceived value, and it makes it tough. It makes it really tricky.
Yeah, right. So I mean, and I think we talked in one of the other episodes about just marketing, going to market. Who are you, right? And I talked about the combination of, you have a value proposition, which is really your promise to the customer. Here's what I'm promising to give you. The second part of that is your competitive advantage. And believe it or not, pricing can be a competitive advantage. I mean, if you want to go and be the loss leader, be at the cheapest level, you can be that, or you can be the other side. Right. You can just say, listen, I'm going to be at the highest level, the highest quality, and you'll get buyers at both ends.
And you know what, like I was on a webinar the other day with a scale up expert, of course, in software. And, I find these interesting. And one of the things that he said, of course, makes a lot of sense, at least in the sector we're in. He said, look, you either are the cheapest or you're the most expensive. You never want to be in the middle because it just confuses people. And are you a premium product or are you more of a commodity where it's not like there's a wrong answer there. It's like you're either, you want to own the market and you have a ton, or you want to be that premium product and you want to be priced the highest. And it was really interesting insight. And I know in our space, I know you've probably seen it too. The typical thing is for software companies, they underprice. That's like chronically underpriced for the value they're delivering. And that's something that we've struggled with trying to figure out, where do we sit, right?
Yeah, what's funny about that is that, you talk about like a free product even, right? I don't know if you've even tested it, but when you go out in the software space at free, people automatically say junk, right? Yeah. They don't put any value on it. Why should we? And you'll lose a certain amount of customers just because it's free. They're like, oh, it won't be worth it.
Yeah, and even too cheap. So I talked to the pricing expert on another podcast one time not too long ago, and he showed a graph. I think he showed me after the call or whatever, but he showed me this graph, and it starts at the bottom and it goes up from that 0 point on the XY axis, and it goes up to the right, and then it kind of goes across, and then it goes down, and then it starts going up again and it goes down. And he basically said, he goes, the price of your product, there's this point where people aren't interested in it because it is perceived as too cheap. And then you get to that point, it's high enough, and he calls it a price shelf, where it drops off a bit, and then it starts going up to the right again. And you got to find that perfect place where kind of number of units and the price. And I'll tell you, like with dry run, we've changed our pricing, like from when we first launched. I don't know how many times we've changed it, but I'll tell you, we started really low, and embarrassingly low. I think when we first launched, we were like $19 Canadian a month.
Yeah.
Our premium, and honestly, I don't even know if it's priced right. I think it's still too low, but our premium right now is $300 a month. And so it's, quite a bit different, right?
That's right. That's right.
But one thing we noticed is that we would change our price and we would either get an increase in sales or zero difference. That's what we experienced. So we could double our prices, like, yeah, people still buying at the same rate, right?
What's funny about that is all these seminars, for years I've done seminars at banks, and they'll put we'll say 50 business owners in a room, and I would make a controversial statement, and I stand by it, and I've got a whole exercise that kind of proves my point. But the statement's this, and I want to kind of gauge what your is. I'm like going, your price doesn't matter. I don't care what your price is. Your price does not matter one bit. What do you think about that?
I can see what you're saying, because in some context, it doesn't matter. In the other context, it's the difference between you winning and losing. So yeah.
But here's what happened. Here's how I prove it to people, right? So I just have 50 people sitting in front of me, and I just show them a picture of 4 different items, right? The first one's a bike, just a bicycle.
Yeah.
And I just say, on your piece of paper right in front of you, write down what's the highest amount you would pay for that, that product. What's the highest, and you can't say you're not going to buy it. You have to. Your grandma needs it. I don't care what it is, but you have to buy it. What's the most you'll come out of pocket? And what's funny is I do it with a bike, a candle, a bottle of wine, and a purse. I just go that simple.
Yeah.
And on every single one of them, I'll get, between $50 and $16,000 on a bike. And I'll get between $1 and $45 on a candle. And I'll get, anywhere between $25 and $7,000 on a purse. But you see where I'm going to with this.
Yeah.
In a small group of 50 people, I get a spread that wide.
Yeah.
And what that tells me is, your price doesn't matter. You're going to find a buyer at any price point. You got to figure out where you want to compete, right? Where is it that you want to compete?
Yeah. And I think it's probably like in a room of 50, you have the one person that will pay $16,000 for a bike. Yep. And then you have one person will pay $50. And then there's probably this middle space where it's like, that's actually probably where I'll make the most money, where it's $1,200 but there's 10 of them or something. And that's the tricky part, is where do you find that, where you have a big enough group and the right price? And that's where it gets a little bit of that artsy, sciencey, stuff, right?
No, dude, you were talking theory now. You're talking. All right, so if you go back to school, if you can remember back into school, they taught a concept called the price elasticity of demand. Do you remember that? And what they say,
Vaguely.
as price goes up, demand tends to come down, and where the two intersect is kind of that perfect pricing point. And I'm going to tell you, there is a company that I ran across in the last 5 years, actually probably 8 years now, that is the best in the world at raising price, and nobody ever complains. Not one person complains, and it's an amazing thing to see. And they practice this concept, and I call it active pricing. All right, first of all, they're a Seattle-based company. Do you think? Can you guess who I'm talking about?
Well, I'm guessing Starbucks, but
it is Starbucks. Now check this out. I challenge anybody on this call, even or watching this video. I challenge anybody to tell me the price of something at Starbucks. You can't.
I have no idea.
Matter of fact, if you go look at the menu board, all the prices are even different between all the different products that they have. And what I figured out, and this is the weirdest thing, I'm gonna tell just a story. It was the weirdest thing because right across the street from Finnegraph was a Starbucks.
Yeah.
Right. So one day I go in, and this is how I figured out that they do this active pricing. One day I go in and I order a grande caramel macchiato. The barista looks at me and goes, "Yes, sir, that'll be $4.54. No problem. That seems right. I got $4 or $5. I don't know what it is. Or at $4.54. 3 months later, I go back, same barista, same Starbucks, same order, different inflection. I want a grande caramel macchiato. That's the only thing changed. Maybe I ordered different with my voice inflection. But what the price came back was $4.63. Am I going?
Yeah.
And what I want that when that happened to me, I started watching the board, right? I go in there, once a week or so, and I noticed that they add 5 to 15 cents on every product every so often, like every 2, 3, 4 months, there'll be a price change like that. And what I think they're doing is increasing price until demand for that product starts to dip off and then hold it. And I'm like, oh my God, that's an amazing thing. Because if I would have done that at the restaurants, the biggest fights I had was when I went from $2 for a bottle of beer to $2.50. Right now, you got to realize I held price solid for like 4 years straight, and I took all the increases, right, that were coming out from Budweiser and those type of things. Now, as soon as I went to $2.50, everybody walked in the door was crying. And what I think, if I would have just stopped taking really cash and just went to credit and went, oh, it's 201. Now it's 207. Now it's 210. I could have done it and nobody would have said anything.
It's such a weird, like the pricing I was talking to with the couple of stories that he shared that I thought that stuck with me was one, I think it was one of the big electronics companies, and they just kept raising. It was like a laptop or something. They're just the same thing, a little bit. And they're selling to so many, they can get all this data back. And he said it went up, and they said something like it went up, I don't know, 17 or $18, no difference. And then it hit this wall, and he goes, it just dropped off like on like a dime or on the nickel. So they just scaled it back and went, that's a perfect price right now for it, right?
That's exactly that concept in action. And you know what? I've never thought about that theory in real life.
Yeah.
Meaning I've never put the two together. And now I'm like going, holy crap, this is really something that is applicable and something you can use, and it gives you real data to make decisions on.
Yeah. And like, it's interesting because you're talking about like the $2 beer, right? So I went to the liquor store last night, so whatever. And it's interesting because if you ask, well, how much would I spend for a beer? I don't know, like, I don't know what the average would be. What would be the most you'd spend? Oh, that's a little different. I've probably spent $40-$50 on a bottle of beer, but it isn't any beer, right? And so it's funny, like I'm walking through the store last night and I'm like, oh, that's interesting. I've never even seen these guys before. Okay. Oh, they're Alberta. I'm grabbing it. But it's not that expensive, right? Oh, I'm going to grab one of these. And then suddenly it's like bourbon barrel aged. And the words bourbon barrel aged just doubled or tripled the price. And then it's bourbon barrel aged from someone that I know, and I know they're a good brewery. Well, that sort of doubled it again. And so there is this context of, and that's sort of an interesting thing. How do you build sort of the brand, the reputation? What is the value that you're delivering that can massively change the dollar figure that you're willing to spend on something?
Yeah. You just said first of all, when you mentioned how much would you pay, and I want to address what you said, but I want to show people, this is a friend of mine, all right, that bought this bottle of beer.
I think I know which one that is too.
I've never seen it before, but it's from Sam Adams, and it's called Utopias. $275.
Yeah. I don't think I go that far, but I've heard of that beer. And
I'll never go that far.
The funny thing is I've heard of that beer, and I've seen, as soon as I saw the bottle, I know which one it was, because they have this really expensive beer in a very short run. They're only selling a few beer, but boy, does that it's that halo product that helps elevate the brand. And that's what you see that with a lot of car companies, like car, halo car, that helps elevate the level of the brand, right?
Yeah. And you know what's funny when you talk about, how much would you pay for a beer? I think all of us are on different scales on every different product at different times, right? Because I just bought a ridiculous truck. I mean, it's way too much money. Am I going, I'll spend it on that truck, when I really probably should have got a Tesla, but I just don't want to. Because it doesn't, I don't have it in me to spend that kind of money on an electric vehicle right now.
Yeah.
But that truck, I'll spend that kind of money.
I've done the same thing. I'm notoriously, like my wife says, I research the fun out of things. So last time we bought a car, I was trying all these different cars, test driving everything. And I was fairly cost conscious, but I kind of, and then I test drove one car, and she's like, yeah, the grin won't come off your face. And so then we ended up buying a car that was like twice as much as every other car we looked at, just because of like, that car is awesome. Like, it's like, it's around 400 horse, and does she go? So that was suddenly, it changed the entire conversation, because I didn't really particularly have that much of a budget in mind. I kind of had an idea, and then I blew it on the water, because I'm like, I just like that one. And it's the exact same thing. There's something that what would trigger somebody to just go like that different, and there is context. Like, I don't know if you can see back there, like our bikes. So I'd have a limit on what I would spend on a bike, right? And then this summer we went and bought electric ones, and the scale blew out of the water of what I'm willing to spend on a bike. And we had nice bikes before, but all of a sudden it's like, once I tried it, and it's like, that's got a battery. That thing is awesome. Suddenly I'm like, the pricing, it would completely change. It was at least double, triple what I would normally pay for a bike. But those things are awesome. And we've I would do it again in a split second. We rode them all summer. They're awesome. Just absolutely awesome.
Well, especially after I hit 50, I would prefer that.
That's there. It's a different experience, and we still get exercise, but it is awesome. So this is turning into an electric bike thing, but it changed they're both bikes, but it totally changed what we valued out of them, right? And then of course I can't just get electric bike. I had to get full suspension and all that. And I will tell you, I don't know if we talked about this before, but that full suspension saved my ass, because I didn't really realize you're going like 30 kilometers an hour in this thing. And we were in a construction zone, and they had this kind of ramp over, it's like this 6 foot up ramp over something that they had underneath. And my 17-year-old brain took over, and I hit that thing. And also my almost 50-year-old brain was, because I'm in the air flying, and I'm like, and I cleared the down ramp and everything. And I'm like, I'm not sure I'm going to land this. This is all going through my head in like a second. And I'm like, this is not good. Yeah. And I landed it like a champ, which was pretty awesome. Full suspension, like that. And then my wife was just like, that was awesome. I should have had that on, because I guess I got some really good air, right? And I still haven't told her, unless she listens to this. And I'm like, it's kind of crap my pants when I was in midair there. I was still just acting like, that was do it all the time, right?
Right there. Yeah. I don't need to do it. I don't need to do it again though. But I mean,
I'm not gonna do it again. Let's not try. Let's not ride that way again because I'll feel obligated.
That's funny. Anymore, am I scared to do half the stuff I used to do?
The reality sets in. I'm not the same age as I used to be, but what I realize is the adrenaline gets going, and I start to lose my mind a little bit. If I'm on like a skateboard or a bike or whatever, not good. I have to. I should have got a bike with no suspension and went really slow. Maybe, I don't know.
All right, so we're talking about pricing, and if
we'll get back to
it. We got beer, we got bikes, we got pricing and business. Look. So, but it's one of those things. I think when you're starting out, I think it's a dartboard. Try to cover your cost. We can go over kind of make sure you know what your fixed costs are, and then variable cost. And I tell you what, I don't know how many people I talk to that don't understand what variable costs are. Right? I mean, and the way I explain it to people is, would you have owed that money if you didn't make a sale? Right? That's your variable cost. Yeah. People say, well, sometimes it's hot, sometimes it's cold, and my air conditioner goes up or it goes down. I'm like, going, well, you still owe it if you make 0 sales, so it's a fixed cost. Yeah. It's because right. So just because the amount varies doesn't make it a variable cost. Now, commission, cost of goods sold for the material you took, in maybe some labor, maybe some overhead if you're a manufacturer. But what you're looking to do is cover not only your fixed cost, but then your variable cost on top of that. And that's really the goal, is to have even a little bit more in your pocket beyond those two. What do you think?
Yeah. Well, and the most valuable thing and it depends what industry you're in, but like I came, before dry run. With dry run, a lot of it is we've really focused on value pricing. With my last business, which was a creative agency, we started with that kind of cost plus sort of model, right? And over time, we started to work in more and more value pricing until we got to kind of a bit of a weird hybrid, because we had to figure out, what were our costs, make sure we're profitable, but should we be making a lot more than cost plus a percentage for some of the things we would do because of the expertise we bring and what we would deliver. And it wasn't necessarily tied to time. And that's a very valuable way to price, is to make sure that you're always looking at, well, what value are you bringing to the customer? And our pricing models changed so much in our agency that there's a couple things that, at the start, it was very much cost plus. But as the years went on, there's a couple things we did that changed our pricing, but also our growth and everything dramatically, was we started to do much more value pricing. So we were looking at it going, okay, what do we bring? What is the right price for this above and beyond that? And then the other thing we did that's is really critical is our minimum charge kept coming up and up and up. And that was really important to help us move up market and stay disciplined to move up market and get higher value contracts, but also higher profit contracts. And that was a discipline that was fundamental to our business growing, was actually raising that floor and staying disciplined on that.
Yeah. So, I mean, what's cool now with your company and maybe what you did, even in the design company, is you have a lot of data, right? You've got a couple of years, several years of data. You can say, hey, listen, when we were here, this is kind of what it was, where you can actually build out those graphs and start to see it for yourself and maybe even predict the next move.
It's like we've been working a lot with our pricing right now, but we're also doing a bit of a shift up market. So there's all of these factors, but you somehow have to kind of pull it into focus and say, okay, this is what we're doing. This is where we're going to go for the next quarter, and this is the price we're going to test in this quarter. And it's a real combination of like I said, the art and science, but you have to have enough time and enough volume to test it as well. and then make some determinations based on that. And I know, like, and this was a really rough way to do it. I remember at one time in the agents, when I had an agency, we would look at it and go, if we weren't losing 30% of our bids, we were underpriced. And I don't know if that was right or wrong. We just had this in our mind that for a while there, I remember we were like, yeah, feels like we're winning. Like we knew we were going to win these ones. But these ones over here, we didn't even have a contact barely, and we're winning all of these.
Yeah.
Something's not right. And we would just like intuitively go, let's jack the price up, because we should not be winning all of these bids with people we don't even know, because you know, and so that was a rough one. And it was tricky because it was really difficult in that case to see what your competitors were bidding, were what they were. It was always precious when we had a contact that would go, well, let me tell you what these guys are, you know, we would get a little bit of that intel. That was hard to get. But now with software, we have a little bit better idea of where the landscape is and what other people are charging. And it helps us to go, we want to be at the top. And it also concerns us if we're like, oh, we're actually not, like, we should be, you know, we want to be the one that's priced the most, you know, but it's got to make sense. It's got to be the right place. So it's tricky to, and it feels scary sometimes to raise those prices. But like I said, my experience is it's scary to raise a price, and then you sit back and go, yeah, all it did is make us more money. Like it's the right thing to do, not so that we're greedy or anything. It's like, we have to grow, we have to build, we have to hire more people. It's expensive to do it, right?
Well, exactly. And you made a key sentence there. Is like, all it did was make us more money. And to me, increasing price, even if volume drops off, could actually make you more money, right? Because again, once you have your costs covered, it's the gross profit that you have to keep or spend. So, I mean, even if you lose units, I mean, you don't work for sales, you work for gross profit. That's where the cash comes from. So, I mean, increasing price does nothing but help gross profit.
Exactly. Because you when you're priced lower, you have more volume, you have to have more capacity to serve it, whether it's your client success or your support or your whatever it is. You know, like even in the agency, every project we brought on, well, you need staff to do all this. We had a limit on the number of staff, and suddenly you're like, well, do we hire more people? Because you're hiring more people to barely scrape by, or do we do higher value, higher profit projects with the staff we have? Much, much more effective.
See, hey, your Canadians leaking out. You said projects.
You know what? You catch them. I don't catch these. And the funny thing is, I think because generally I'm down the States half the year, and finally I start getting into projects and Mazda and pasta, and then I come back and it's like, now it's pasta again. And I have this weird mix of I never know if I'm pronouncing anything right anymore.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, you are a hybrid, that's for sure. So, to me, we're going back to that notion of, or I'm going back to that notion of maybe sales come down, but gross profit comes up. When I see that on an income statement, sales come down, gross profits going up, I celebrate. I'm like going, if I can do less work and make more money, let's do that. So it never bothers me in that case. Now, some people are just top line driven. I'm more focused on gross profit. I mean, I want to make sure that's the number I maximize. And for those of you that are listening and don't know where to start with the industry average. If everyone else is making 25% gross profit, at least start there. That's average. Now that's a C player, but it's a place to at least gauge where you're at, right? If you're not making it, because if you're at 25%, that also means you're probably at market price.
Yeah.
So from there, you can determine, do I want to be cheaper than market price, or do I want to go up the value chain a little bit?
Well, and the other thing that I would definitely add is you don't do anything until you've calculated your net profit as well. Because that's
like how much you want. Yeah. How much you want.
Because that net is where the rubber hits the road, right? Like that's where your expenses are included in that. And I think you mentioned it is like too many businesses run from their top line. And that is scary as hell, because there tends to be this assumption that, my top line is growing and it seems really big. Have you looked at your bottom line? And
Yeah.
there, because there's too many people that run from their top line and their bank account and hope for the best. And that is a scary situation to be in. And what I find, like, because we're talking with businesses all the time, there's ones that in the end, they can be profitable, but what they miss by going by that top, they kind of go top line, yeah, bottom line, I seem to be profitable, is that oftentimes there's products or services within their line that's actually are losing the money. And it's not doing any benefit. It's not getting them any clients. It's not doing anything. It's just simply losing the money, draining off the top. They just happen to be making enough money on some of the other lines to compensate and put them in the black.
Well, yeah. I mean, anytime I analyze a business, I mean, sales is the last thing I want to fix. I want to make sure we're efficient at all the other, line items, gross profit, operating expense, net profit. And then you can go focus on sales. Otherwise, it's like you said, you could be digging a bigger hole, right? And I worked with a nonprofit in Seattle, Washington. What they had was a manufacturing plant, and they made parts for Boeing, right? There was like 2,500 different parts that they made for Boeing airplanes. And some of them, that liner that's on the inside that you can touch, and you sit next to and your shoulders against. They made that liner. They made some of the hatch parts, for opening the plane and those type of things. But they had a gross profit problem that was happening. And when we looked at the contract, there was no escalator clause for when raw materials came up. So the price will say, I forget about the raw material. I'll just call it aluminum. When aluminum prices went up, they couldn't raise the price on Boeing. So they had to absorb it. And what happened was the negotiated price from an 18-month-old contract flipped. So it was costing them more to buy the aluminum than to sell the part to Boeing. Now Boeing's not in the business of ruining a small business, right? They don't want to hurt it. All they do is see on a computer screen, who's cheapest on part number 1, 2, 3 today, and they click order, right? I need 1,000 of those.
Yeah.
Well, when you're upside down, you might as well build the part and give them money on top of it, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That's exactly what was happening.
And unfortunately, like this is what the current environment with COVID has done to a lot of businesses, because it threw so many industries in flux and threw so many industries upside down. And you've heard of all the different issues with the I don't know what the word is that I'm thinking of, but all of the shipping and all of the raw materials moving back and forth, all the issues they have, it's thrown all the pricing up and down. And it circles all the way back to the issues you can have when you've locked in some of these things into your contract and make assumptions, right?
Right.
You can lose that profit so quickly because that price hasn't changed in X amount of years, and suddenly it does, right? Like it's an issue that I think a lot of businesses have faced now more than ever before.
Yeah. Well, and what's funny is that during those seminars that I teach, I built this exercise and I call it the mini P&L. And I've actually had, people that attended the seminars reprice their whole store after going through this exercise.
Yeah.
And here's what it is. Have you ever done a Sudoku puzzle?
Oh yeah. Yeah,
right, where there's, where there's all these boxes and only one number can fit in any of the boxes, right? Because it's an order, 0 through 9 across the top or bottom or every line. Well, the mini P&L works the same way, right? But you look at, in this case, just 3 lines, which is sales. Then you look at cost of goods sold, and then gross profit, right? And it works the same way as just a P&L, an income statement. The 2 boxes on the side, you divide them, 2 boxes next to sales, 2 boxes next to cost of goods sold, 2 boxes next to gross profit, and you put dollars in one side and percentage of sales in the other. So sales is always 100%. And what I teach them is if you go look at the industry average, or you look at whatever your goal is, maybe you want 25% gross profit. You put 25% in the gross profit column for percentage, right? So think about like a tic-tac-toe board where instead of in the dollars, I got percentage. Now I got 100% of sales. I don't have anything in cost of goods sold, but I got 25% left over in gross profit. Then I say, okay, well, how much did you pay for your cost of goods sold? And they'll say, well, I bought this item for $10, right? We'll put that 10 in cost of goods sold dollars. So now I got 3 different points. I got 100% sales. I got cost of goods sold of $10, and then I have gross profit at 25%. Well, I start filling in the gaps, right? Filling in the boxes. So 100 minus a number equals 25. Well, that's 75%. That way, $10 is 75% of sales. And all you do is divide it, right? You divide 10 by 75%, and it gives you the sales number every time. You always get your pricing right. There's no guessing to it. Only one number fits, and you always get it right. So, I mean, when people do that, they actually maintain a constant gross profit percentage. They just have to maximize on the dollar side.
Yeah, and the thing that I would add to that is that's the starting point. That guarantees you get that profit that you need. But depending on what you're selling, depending on what your service is, that's where you start bringing in that value pricing and take that last look and go, all right, like if it's a commodity and it's like, there's a bunch of competitors that are basically selling the same thing, then that's where you go. But if you have something that's actually quite unique, that is precious, that is offering a ton of value, then you start going, okay, how do we make sure that we're actually pricing it right? Not just by our costs, but what is it actually worth? What would someone be willing to spend for that? And sometimes it could actually be dramatically higher to where they actually see the value enough that, like you said, if it's too cheap, they won't even buy it. Right. So
That's right. That's right. Hey, before I started that math problem, I didn't realize how hard it would be to do math without like a whiteboard. So that probably really screwed the pooch on that example. But
no, it all sounded good. I was following you. I hope everybody else was. Well, that makes perfect sense to me.
We know exactly what you're talking about.
You described a grid very well, and I followed it. It made perfect sense. So that's like kudos to you.
Yeah, well, I didn't think through the execution of it. I'm like, and now what do I do? It's like you jump into the water and you're like, well, I have to swim back to shore or something.
Well, for everyone listening here, we haven't planned the execution on anything ever. So that's how it works. But that's how we get some interesting stuff coming out that way. Sometimes.
What's funny is that the actual description of the episode that you see is our notes. That's our plan. That's our whole planning process, is that 3 or 4 sentences. We're like, well, we're going to talk about this.
Exactly. And so far so good. But this has been a really interesting topic because it's so rich and it's so important, because that's the other thing we haven't really brought in, like the success and failure on a business, how much pricing matters. And because you have to, let's say you have to justify that price. You go, okay, for me to make that gross profit, to me to make that net, here's what I have to price this at. So you can say, okay, that's the price, but how do you get the sales for that? And that's where it circles back to, you have to be able to communicate the value. You have to be able to market to that and make sure that it makes sense. The value is there for your customer. And you can't leave it to them to sometimes figure it out. You have to make sure that you have that value prop and it's explained and it makes sense to them.
You know what's interesting about that communicating the value prop? It reminded me of a story. Have you ever heard the story of Burger King and how they made a major mistake when they introduced the value menu?
No, I was thinking you're going with a 1/3 burger, but that's a totally different story.
No, but I mean, all right. So Burger King was the first to introduce the value menu, where it's items for $1, right? Yeah. And if you go to Burger King, I mean, it's they're the home of the Whopper.
Yeah.
What do you think they want you to buy? The Whopper, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's just like if you go to a restaurant and you look, on the kind of the top third of the left-hand side, if you're reading that way, there's always a box that say we're famous for chef special. It's not necessarily what they're famous for. Generally, they put high gross profit margin items there. You'll see a pasta, you'll see something that they make the most money because they want you to buy that one because they make the most money every time somebody buys that plate. Yeah. Well, that's why Burger King wants you to buy the Whopper, because that has the highest gross profit margin, installed into it. But when they built the value menu, they made a miniature version of the Whopper and they called it the Whopper Junior. Instead of like 2 patties or whatever it was, there was 1 patty.
Yeah.
Well, here's what happened. Guy like me walks in and I look at the menu and I go, Whopper, $3.63. Whopper Junior, $1. I'll take 2 Whopper Junior. Exactly. Give me 2. Right. But look what just happened. $2 sale versus a $3.63 sale. And what they saw in the first 90 days is that gross profit took a nosedive just for that reason, right? They were using actually more materials because they already had the buns, all these things for it. They were just selling it for less money. So you know how they fixed it? It actually is relevant to today, but this is how they fixed it back then. They used what I call the Goldilocks Theory, right? Too big, too small, just right. They introduced a new item and they called it the double Whopper, right? So instead of 2 patties, whatever, I got 4 patties and all this other stuff involved. Yeah. And a guy like me would walk in and go, double Whopper. And I'll tell you this, they don't care if you buy it. I'm probably the only guy in America that's ever bought a double Whopper, right? So, but they don't care. What they want you to have is this experience. Double Whopper sounds too big. Whopper Junior sounds too small. I'll just go for the Whopper. Yeah. Right. It was an ingenious way, and they brought gross profit back in line and actually increased sales because of it.
And that's so interesting because it goes like even like in the software area, it's like you got your basic, you got your premium. You're really trying to get people to upgrade to the middle, right? That's right. Sort of where they're going. The story I thought you might be going towards, and it's more on the messaging side, was the story. I'm pretty sure it was Burger King introduced the 1/3 burger to 1/3 pounder to compete with the 1/4 pounder because they said, well, we'll make a bigger burger. And it failed miserably because too many people thought 1/3 was smaller than 1/4. and it's like a sad statement, but it actually shows how important it is, like the messaging and to really make sure you get your messaging right, because the entire thing flopped on a message that should have worked, but failed miserably.
Oh, I hadn't heard that. I remember the 1/3 pounder, but I didn't remember that it failed because of that reason.
That's why it disappears so quickly. It's a sad state of mathematics.
It's the same reason why we won't go to kilometers and Celsius.
Yeah, I haven't figured that one out. I tell you, I struggle with the combos every time I get down south of the border here. I'll admit it makes sense to have the even divisions. I can wrap my head around that, but someday maybe you guys will join the party. So,
all right. So if a guy like me weighs 220 pounds, what would I weigh in Canada?
Well, see, that's the funny thing is Canadians are very much a hybrid. So we'll use kilometers, we use Celsius, we also use pounds and feet for height and weight of a person. But
centimeters.
Yeah, I don't even know how much I weigh or height. And you know what I'm convinced the reason is because so much of our sports comes from the US. And in sports, everybody's 6'2", 220 or whatever. And so we've never got past the person's weight and height is still in imperial in Canada.
Well, yeah, because scouts probably can't tell the difference on paper. Like, they probably discounted the Canadian athletes because of it.
I remember years ago, a newspaper in town here, somebody must have dictated, I was the editor or whatever, dictated that they go to metric for weight and height. And so the sports section suddenly for about a week it's like this 1.92 meter, I don't know how many kilograms, because no one knows what it is. It lasted about a week. And because I think everyone just went, what are you doing? And so, yeah, we do kilometers per hour Celsius, right? But I will tell you, height and weight, nah, it's still like, I have no idea how tall I am in centimeters or meters or whatever. And I have no idea how much I weigh in kilograms, like not a clue, because we got this weird hybrid thing going on. But with temperature, it makes sense. 0 is freezing, 100 is boiling, minus 100 is just too down cold. So there's just like, obviously you don't quite get to that, but some of those things make sense, right? And so I when I'm south of the border, I'm like miles, and I'm confused, and temperature, I'm trying to do fake math in my head. I can't do it.
Yeah, well, I told you, that my counterparts in Toronto were complaining about 50 some degree weather, 56 or something like that up in Toronto. And I had to go Google it to determine that was still about 10 degrees cooler than it was here in Texas.
That is hot though. That is, but they got the Humidex. They're humid up there. Same with you guys. You're humid.
Yeah.
But it's funny, because for temperature wise, all I know is like about 115, because I've experienced it, is around 47. And I know, like, what is it? 13 is around 0, around freezing. And then room temperatures around 70 to 75. That's my only anchors, are those 3 temperatures, to try and do the calculation to figure that out.
Yeah, right on. Hey, I want to spend some time today with you after this podcast, putting together our website, right? Just even if it's simple enough. For those of you listening, it's going to be mikeandblaine.com, keeping it super simple that way.
Yep. Easy.
Mikeandblaine.com. If you haven't seen us in person, you only listen to us on audio, you can go to YouTube, because Blaine does a great job of getting us up on YouTube. We got our own YouTube channel, Nobody Told Me, with Mike and Blaine. And today we've been talking about pricing, and here's what I learned, right? I learned that, there's generally a price point for everyone. You've got to choose, right? Do I want to compete at one level or another? Do I want to be competitive at the bottom of the market with a lot of volume, or do I want to be competitive at the top of the market with a lot of quality and be perceived as a market industry leader that way? So what'd you learn?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think the big thing is on a lot of things, people underprice. So if you're starting out, just take your initial price and double it and try that. I would just say that as a thing. But the other thing is to know, make sure you're profitable. That's the other thing that, you can look at your competitors and you can come up with but make sure you're profitable. Do your calculations, make sure that you're in the black on all of your products and all of your channels.
Good stuff. All right. So I'm Mike Mylan. That is Blaine Birch. And we're both authors, right? He is the author of Pandemic Cash Flow, and you can get that on Amazon. And I am Don't Be a Dumb Business Owner, and you can get that on Amazon as well. So pleasure to see you again. I am so glad this break is over. I'm looking forward to being healthy again.
Yeah, we hopefully we'll do another string of at least 14 weeks before we have to take a break again, and hopefully that'll be just because of Christmas. I don't want to get I don't want to get sick again. I'm going to hide out in the basement as long as I can here, I think.
There you go. We'll see you next week.
All right. Thanks, man. This is fun.